Hello. The topic before us today is to be talking about stub nibs, cursive italics, and italic nibs. They're all grouped in the same family, and before you here you have a selection of both dip nibs that fall in this category, and also here I have a Lamy Safari. So this is a 1.0 stub. That's 1.0 millimeter. And we have a Pilot Plumix, also a 1.0 millimeter. Actually, the Lamy Safari is labeled a 1.1. Sorry about that. And then we'll be looking at a higher up tier at a gold nib. And this is the Stipula 1.3, and it has a custom italic grind on it. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive on all this, and we'll be using some calipers and talking about the importance of those when we're working with stub and italic nibs. Hopefully I'll be able to give you guys a look at what these nibs are like really up close with a loupe over my camera. And we'll do some writing samples. I also have some writing samples of pens that I have had in my possession but don't presently, so that we can have a wider variety of stub and italics to look at. So let's just say from the beginning, you are interested in dipping your toe into stub and italic nibs. Why would you want to do this? Well, compared to a more standard nib, this is going to give you at least two things. One is line variation, and the other is a crisp line. Those are the differences in a basic way, as far as when you look at the writing samples, what the difference is going to be. So if you have already written with a standard fountain pen, you know that they come in fine, extra fine, fine, medium broad, double broad, triple broad, and that's the width of the nib and the line that you get. But the line will always be consistent no matter what kind of stroke you make, left, right, up, down, diagonal. And it's going to be, I'm going to say like a loose line. So, you know, the line's there, but it's not going to have a firm look to it. This will make a lot more sense once we jump into the writing samples. But let's just say, yes, again, you want to start with checking out some stub and italics. You're interested. These characteristics interest you. So the most affordable way to start would be to buy entry-level fountain pens with this characteristic of nib. Or if you are already kind of into dip nibs, that is also a very economical way to go. And further, what dip nibs have to offer that fountain pens wouldn't is if you buy a calligraphy set of dip nibs, they will come with various widths in the set. This is very good because you can find out through just sampling them like this what width and how sharp you might enjoy buying a fountain pen in, especially if you're looking at wanting to eventually buy a gold nib, because this will come in 0.5, 0.7, 1, 1.3. So you're not going to hit like every 0.0 but you'll definitely be able to narrow in what size is of interest to you. So I'm going to go over these, and I'm going to go over what brand I recommend, because I've tried 3 of the leading brands, and I definitely have a strong opinion about which one I would recommend. We're going to take a look at this Lamy Safari that's a 1.1 millimeter, the Pilot Plumix at a 1.0. We're going to look at the Stipula, and again, I have some writing samples. We're going to look under a magnifying glass, the loupe, so that we can see up close what these nibs really look like. A lot of people draw like a loose picture of what the nibs look like, but I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not particularly good at drawing, and I think just seeing it will be more helpful. And I'm also going to be showing what this is. I picked this pen because it has a very, I guess, like exaggerated example of what a rounded nib looks like. So we're going to bring this all into focus. So let's start by talking about these dip nibs. Okay, we're going to start off with these dip nibs. So here I have manuscript dip nibs in the Italic. It's going to say like cursive script or something like that. Here are the speedballs, and then here are the brows. So I've gotten all three. I've tried them out. These are the broadly available ones that come in actual calligraphy sets. So my least favorite is the speedball. The nice thing about these, I will say, is the nibs are very crisp. So let's take a look at one. Okay, here is one of the speedball dip nibs. So I think you can see that is pretty crisp. See that edge? Not too much rounding to it. So that's the good thing about it. Here is a manuscript. Also very crisp. So again, as far as what we're looking for, that is a very good sign. Finally, these are the brows. Also very crisp. Now, the thing that I want to point out that's different between these three brands, the biggest issue is quality control. So speedball, these nibs, most of them, not all of them, but most of them were kind of worthless. They're misaligned. The backing to them is not well made, so it just kind of moves back and forth. The quality is just, it leaves something great to be desired. This one is very misaligned. So it rendered most of this set unusable. Literally unusable. Like, I wouldn't even give it to someone I disliked. It's that bad. So that was kind of worthless. So that's my least favorite because of quality control. Is it possible to get a good set? Of course. In fact, if you have, leave a comment down below. But from the whole set with the multi-piece that I got, probably like one of them is usable. And the other ones are misaligned and the backing is falling off. It's just, it wasn't good. So, but it looks like if they did work, their shape is well made for the purposes. So, it's also, yeah, you can just see how not, not correct this whole situation is. But, the speedball on the brows came in a more true cursive set in the sense of they are slight obliques on the right foot. So let me get under the loop again. I'll use the biggest nib so you can see this. Okay. Do you see how it's slightly slanted? The tip of that nib, it's not perfectly straight. And the right foot, or the rightmost part of the nib, is shorter than the left. So it's at a bit of an angle sloping down toward the right. That's what I wanted to point out. So that's called that would be a slight right foot oblique or a reverse oblique. So that's good for cursive writing specifically. If you like cursive writing, that's an excellent thing. If you don't and you write more straight up and down like this, just get a regular stub set. That's what I would recommend. But generally speaking, originally these were meant for cursive writing. So having that slight oblique so that when you hold your pen like this, when it touches the paper, everything is more flat and consistent, and it's more ergonomic for the writer. They also have dip nib pens. In fact, I have one, so I'll show it in a minute, that are for oblique writing. But if you get an oblique set, then you don't need that particular handle. So these are not oblique. They're just straight. Manuscript, I'm pretty sure. Yes, those are perfectly straight. So these are my second choice, but same problem. The quality control left something to be desired. I remember my old set was phenomenal and I had no issues with them whatsoever, but when I did buy a new set, I had some quality control issues again. Same kind of thing where it's just misaligned, the grind is scratchy instead of smooth. It's a problem. So that left brows, and these were my favorite. Still, unfortunately, I did have one nib out of the whole set that was garbage, basically, and didn't write well. I'm not really sure why, but that's just what happened. So for quality, I would definitely recommend the brow set, but I'll let you be your own judge of that. Coming to the handle, this is what the oblique nib holder looks like, and you would put the nib in this part here. So, and then you would tilt this. So you'd be writing like this. See how it gives you that slant? That's what it's for. Then this is the traditional one, which I would recommend. And this is the speedball handle. So it's just plastic, but I find this grip very comfortable. This hourglass shape. And the durability, you get ink on it, no big deal. I wouldn't strongly recommend these inexpensive wood types. They're porous, they chip, they crack. Even the holder is like metal and kind of so-so inside, versus these are machined out probably because they're plastic. So that is the introduction and overview of getting to know stub italic nibs via the dip route. And when you're dipping, just have some kind of inkwell, whether it's a bottle of ink itself, but you can use fountain pen ink where there's calligraphy ink too, but for our purposes, we're definitely staying in the fountain pen realm for this video, so we're talking about fountain pen ink. If you have it in the sample vial, I would recommend having an inkwell so that it doesn't turn over, or have something stabilizing like this so that when you have your sample vials opened, they don't accidentally tip over and make a mess on you. Okay, next we're going to talk about entry-level stub nibs and italics. Okay, so there are plenty of entry-level pens that come in stubs, but not so much italics. You can get something closer to the italic. So again, a stub is a rounder edge, an italic is sharper. So much more of a right-hand turn on that one. Let's take a look at the difference, because these are actually both leaning toward italic, and the Pilot more so than the Lamy. So if you're looking for a sharper entry level, closer to an italic, I would recommend these two. If you want something rounder, more true to being a stub, I would recommend Kaweco or Twisby. There's other brands again too, but those are the ones I've tried that I'm more familiar with. So if you want a rounder, easier transition into this whole stub italic realm, those would be the ones to pick. And if you want something a little bit sharper, then I would recommend these. So let's take a look at the Lamy Safari nib and the Plumix under the loop. So you can see, compared to the dip nibs we were looking at, this is a lot more round on the tip of the nib there. So that's going to be less sharp, less crisp, but ultimately easier to write with. So that's the Lamy 1.1 stub, is how they label it. Okay, here is the Pilot Plumix. There we are. A little bit more crisp, not so rounded on the end of the nib. So this is heading closer to an italic, but not quite. Okay? Okay, let's take a look at an actual italic. This is a crisp italic. It's also a slight right foot oblique, and it's a 1.3. So let's take a look at this under the loupe. Much sharper, more boxy corners. I'm going to turn it over. And you can see the oblique, so the slant on the end of the tip. Much sharper. So that is a true crisp italic. And you can feel the sharpness of the edges when you write, especially if you're writing incorrectly. So let's put all these to paper so we can see what kind of results they render as you write. Okay, here I have laid out the Browse calligraphy set. So these are more of the italics, and I'll give you a writing sample. So this is a 1 millimeter nib, and it's italic, and it's a reverse oblique, or a right foot oblique. So again, in the writing, you'll see that it's much more crisp, and on the horizontal, you get very fine lines, and on the vertical, it would be 1 millimeter. So that is the uniqueness that these nibs have to offer, is line variation and crisp writing. Let me show you side by side. These are the other sizes they come in also. So it goes all the way up to, I think this is a 1.5. Oh, 5 millimeters. Okay, 5 millimeters. And I think the smallest one is this one, so that's the 1 millimeter. But every set is different. Some of them come with a 0.7, a 0.5, and those are really neat to try out also. But let me show you what it looks like on a normal pen. Here's a more standard pen. Let's take a look under a loupe. See how at the tip there, it's basically a ball. And no matter how you write, at what angle, it's very forgiving because it's a ball and it's not flat like a stub or an italic. And this is the difference in the writing. This is a cross. I don't know what model or anything, but see the difference the cross is round and soft, I guess, and adds a basic character to it. And then the Stub Italic has crispness to it, and it has line variation. Here you see thin strokes, and on the downward stroke you would see the broad stroke. So that is the difference in the writing. Let's take a look at the next pens. Here is the Pilot Plumix. This is a 1.0 millimeter, and this is a Stub Italic, I would say. Here is the Lamy Safari. And this is a 1.1 millimeter stub, kind of italic. I would say it's more of a stub, really, though. So even looking at the browse set, you can see that it's much sharper than the Lamy and the Pilot because they're more stubs. So when you're writing with these, it's going to be more forgiving because the tip is more rounded. So it doesn't have to be so precisely flat and perfectly not rotated when you write, versus the sharper or more italic the nib is, the less forgiving it is. You have to have it perfectly flush on the page, otherwise it will not perform properly for you, or it'll feel scratchy, even to the point of cutting the paper. So let's take a look at the 1.3 Italic. Here's the Stipula. So this is the gold nib. Or move paper down a bit here. There you go. So obviously 1.3 is larger than the 1.0, so a lot more width, but the same characteristic as far as crispness because it's an italic. So also we were going to mention the importance of why you might be interested in having calipers. So with these calipers, you can get a nib and actually check right at the tipping what this truly reads as. Right at the tip end, because that's where you're going to be writing. Oh, gotta set it to 0. Okay, so it's saying 1.24. So this is labeled as a 1. A 1.1 millimeter, but it's reading as a 1.24. What's the difference? Well, mathematically, So you might think this isn't a big difference, but it really can be, especially when you're trying to attune the size that you're most interested in. So when you get into the details of it, knowing what this actually comes in at is a very helpful thing. So we can check this one. This one is supposed to be a 1.0. And I got it at 0.99. So basically that could have been my bad too. It's probably a 1 millimeter. So quality control and correct advertising is on point there. Another way this is helpful is if you want to buy a either steel or gold nib pen that does not have a stub or italic grind on it. It's just a standard fine, medium, broad, what it may be. You want to make it into a cursive italic or a stub or an italic. You can have these calipers. You can measure what the end of it is, and that way you have an idea of what size it will become. Or you can specifically say, if it applies, say you get a broad nib and you say, I want this to be a 1 millimeter stub or italic or a 0.7 or a 0.8, they can ballpark you into that area because it makes a big difference. I'm going to show you some writing samples of other stub and italics. Here is a writing sample of a TWSBI. This is the TWSBI Precision in a 1.1 steel stub. So you can see, though it's definitely more crisp than a normal pen would be, it's still a very rounded finish, a soft rounded finish. Here is a Pilot Vanishing Point. So this is an 18K 1.0 stub, although honestly, this is heavily leaning toward an italic. You can see in the crispness. And I don't have my vanishing point with me right now. It went on vacation to California. It's getting tuned, but the nib is very unique. So when I get it back, I'll take a look with you guys under a loop to check it out and do a writing sample. But I actually have a writing sample of it in one of my previous videos for the vanishing point, so you can check that out also. Here is a Pilot Vanishing Point that was a soft fine, and I had it ground into a cursive italic with a full flex. So you can see here also crisp, but not as soft as a stub and not as sharp as an italic. This was a really nice grind. Likewise, this one's off getting tuned, so I'll do a sample, but at least here's a writing sample for it. This is probably close to, I'm gonna guess, a 0.5 millimeter and a 0.7 millimeter unflexed, just for the cursive italic writing. And then in the flex, it's probably, I'm gonna guess, like a 1.3, 1.5 if I really push it. This is a vintage Pelican 400 that had a medium nib, and then I had it ground to a cursive italic. So again, you can just see a writing sample of the result that renders. This pen, being vintage, has quite a bit of natural flex to it, so I'm able to, you can see like on the word Pelican, it was able to be flexed out a bit. Also, the wetter the nib is, the softer the line's going to be. So you definitely want, if you like crispness, you want to strike the wetness of the nib to be within the medium to slightly wet, but if you get too wet, you're going to lose that crisp finish of the Italic. All right, that is all I have on stub and cursive italics and italics for today. So, as always, thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions or comments below, I'll put some links in the description as well. Thanks, have a good one.